Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Consultants. I'm Nicholas Kelly,
And I am Ethan Silvers.
and today we're very fortunate to have David Langer with us, and we're going to be talking about the top 5 mistakes you must avoid in becoming a data-driven organization. David, we'd love to hear a little bit of an intro. For those who don't know you, you have a massive following on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and you've got 45,000 followers on YouTube, which is 46,000 more than we have. And we'd love to hear a little bit of your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the program. I really am flattered to be a guest. So I've been in the analytics space for about 10, 11 years now, more generally in technology for more than 20 years. And I've done analytics work at companies like Microsoft and Data Science Dojo and Schedulicity. And these days I'm actually out on my own as a solopreneur. I create training content designed for any professional. And my mission these days is really to empower any professional, regardless of role and background, to learn how to do data analysis to have more impact at work. So I focus on what I call the trinity of Excel, SQL, and R in pursuit of that mission.
Thank you for that, David. Nick did mention that you have 46,000 more followers than us. I think it was on LinkedIn. We'll go back to the math to that in a second. But that the big reason why you have is because we really are focused on MySpace. Yeah, and there we have. What's the last count on MySpace? How many followers we have, Nick? Do you know that number?
There's several.
Off the top.
We have several followers on MySpace, and
right. I mean, you guys are waiting for the comeback, man. It's green field. You just wait for MySpace to come back, and you're going to explode. You're going to go viral. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, this is embarrassing. It's already back.
Yeah, Dave, for someone who works a lot with data, you might want to look into that.
Yeah, that's actually the data and analytics platform. Yeah,
that could be. Check that. Maybe that's number 6 on the 5 mistakes to avoid.
That's right. Dave, how do you want to start this off with the number 5 or number 6?
We'll start with number 5
right.
Because obviously I need to do research on number 6.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 5, the number 5 mistake out of the top 5 that organizations make when they try to become data driven is that thinking that training, they go through a training program, they educate people on how to use data, and they think it's a one and done approach. I've trained everybody, boom, we're now data driven. In actuality, based on my experience, that is certainly a necessary step, but not necessarily sufficient. So typically what organizations are going to need is some sort of ongoing coaching, either from a COE, a center of excellence within their own organization, or maybe they hire some outside consultants for a period of time to help folks not only cement the skills that they've learned in the training, but also learn how to apply them.
And I'm rebranding COE to Center of Ethan.
All right, that works, right?
Yeah.
Obviously makes a lot of sense for many organizations.
Does that date me, by the way, to use the term COE? Do people still actually use that term?
Well, it depends. If you're using it as Center of Excellence, yes, it's stated. If you're using it as Center of Ethan, it's cutting edge.
Right, there you go.
Just like MySpace.
That's right.
It's that level of cutting edge. Dave, would you also, does community of practice come up as well in that context?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sort of idea of look, we're not going to go train a bunch of members of our organization and then just throw them to the wolves. They'll be like, look, you've got tools, you've got skills. All of a sudden, we should see tremendous increases in our profits as a result now that we're data driven. Or you need some sort of support network for folks to exercise those skills and hone them to actually get the results that you want to get from being a data driven organization.
Love it. So while it's a good step to start enabling folks with some training, it's a step in a wider process of shifting the culture and getting people on board.
Awesome. Dave, I failed to see what you're giggling about. I don't know. Could you help us understand?
I just want a Nick Kelly coffee mug so bad right now. I just don't know what else to say. I'm so
Dave,
envious.
Hey, Dave, wait till you see this.
And you guys have got the best swag. Oh my goodness.
If you play your cards right, Dave.
Well,
Sweet. Get your copy mug in the mail. Yes. Next LinkedIn post, it'll be me like this with each of your faces.
Oh, two. Wow, Dave, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, you're a guest who's worthy of us sending you one. We'll figure out whether we want to go for two of them.
Okay, all right, fine. Fair.
Yeah.
You got to keep expenses down. I get it.
We that's right. Although expense is really no consideration when you have the amount of followers that we have on MySpace. Nick, did you want to go more? I really like this topic of number 5, where we could go down into like more around the change management and how to do that. But Nick, what do you want to do? Do you want to go down to number 4?
Yeah, let's do. Yeah, Dave, and I'm sure there's probably going to be some connectivity here to some of the others. So I might leave some questions we have. I think that number 5 is very interesting, and certainly, like Ethan says, could go down a rabbit hole. What's your number 4?
Well, as a consultant myself, I've got to use the word here. Number 4 has synergy with number 5.
Love it.
And that is limiting the training to only select roles in your organization. Right. So, for example, we're only going to train people with data in their title. That's just silly. The idea here is, look, if you want to have a truly data-driven organization, if you want to reap the benefits of data for your company to have a disproportionate impact in terms of your competitiveness in the marketplace, everybody's got to be data-driven. Okay, well, maybe not everybody, right? But you'd be surprised how many roles in the organization actually need the training. They need the basic skills. Now, the good news is that, in my experience, most folks in the organization probably only need like 1 day's worth of training. So we're talking about some very simple tools. They can be just done in Microsoft Excel. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need to buy any new tooling or anything like that. You train the folks up, and then with the coaching, those 2 things for the bulk of roles in your organization is what you need. Now, some folks are going to need more than that. So they might need 2 days worth of training, 3 days worth of training, 4 days worth of training, 4 days worth of training. Now, the great news is that you can roll this out in an iterative fashion. You don't have to have a big bang approach. It doesn't have to cost millions of dollars. You don't have to take a lot of people offline for hundreds of person hours or anything like that. You can structure it so that it makes sense for your organization. But at base, you should assume that many, many roles in your organization are going to get some form of training, as well as coaching.
To put you on the spot very intentionally, Dave, when you do you have in mind a certain role that like most people wouldn't expect that they would need some form of training? And I just think like folks who are watching this would be interested in like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, but that makes sense.
Yeah. So for example, the one example that I classically use is customer service. So let's say you have a customer call center. You're probably going to want all of your management and all of your leads trained and coached. Do you need individual phone reps on the floor actually trained in this? Probably not. Maybe there might be some organizations where that would be applicable, but generally speaking, that's the kind of thing that you see. And what I often see as a former big IT employee myself is that there are like swaths of the organization, like customer service, that are often not included in these sorts of things. And that's not what you're going to do that's not how you're going to become a truly data-driven organization, to say, look, customer service people don't need this. HR people don't need this. Finance people don't need this because they already know how to use Excel. No. Basically, it's going to be most roles in the organization. A few folks oh God, I hate to use this terminology, but I can't think of any better way of saying it, at the bottom of the hierarchy.
Yeah, just like Nick on this show.
Yeah, that sounds so elitist. I'm sorry to say that,
Yeah.
But hopefully you get the idea of what I'm trying to convey. Not everyone in every role is going to, but you'd be surprised how many roles actually do probably need the training and the coaching to actually become a truly data-driven organization.
I don't want to let that comment from Ethan slip by us, Dave. When he talks about that I'm at the bottom of the ladder, I'm the foundation, the actual ground on which the show is built.
Yeah,
so,
it's a very shaky foundation.
Very, very solid.
We're bringing over contractors to get that fixed as soon as we can.
Awesome. Dave, I have a bunch of questions coming up with that one as well. I think it's a really interesting topic, and I don't want to jump the gun because maybe it's going to come up. But if you don't want me asking, then if, let's say, customer service as an example is a group of people that maybe traditionally don't get trained. And like you said, maybe they're more at the operational sort of tactical level. Are there any roles that you'd highlight that, like executive level, that are really important to get on board?
All of them. I do.
So that's me. So like what, Dave? While I'm also the foundation, I'm also the C-suite of the show, and
Oh, wow.
Ethan's there in the middle.
I know. I would say Nick considers me like janitorial services for this show.
Yeah, so we could certainly discuss this now, or maybe we could like put a pin in this and hold for at the end of the list. But in general, an ideal situation, of course, this would start from the top and work its way down. Right?
Dave, I like how you basically just told Nick that not a great question and like pretended like we'll come back to it at some point.
No, it's a great question because I've got a quote that's part of the number one item on the list, and I don't want to jump the gun because the quote is so awesome.
Yeah, sorry about that, Dave. I didn't mean to be so insightful. So maybe we can maybe we can jump to the next one.
All right, we will come back to that, Nick. I promise. Okay, so number 3 on the list is being fascinated with machine learning or AI or anything related to that space, predictive analytics space. Being overly fascinated, overly obsessed with it. That's the number 3 mistake. And data-driven and machine learning are not synonyms. They are not the same thing. You can apply machine learning without being data-driven. Companies have been using predictive analytics for a long time without being data-driven in the way we're talking about it today. Yeah. And then you can be data-driven without machine learning, because the reality is most organizations need little to no machine learning in reality. If they're looking to make substantive changes, long-lasting changes, machine learning, firing up data science team, those are all well and good, and they should have a certain level of ROI to be sure. But if you're talking about something transformational, then machine learning doesn't really apply, quite frankly. So that's number 3, right? I mean, machine learning is super hot these days, AI, everyone's fascinated with it. It reminds me of big data, when big data was a thing. When Hadoop first came out, okay, I'm going to kid you not. I just got a quick anecdote here. So when I was working at a very large software company based in Redmond, Washington, which will remain nameless, I had an executive come up to me and say, can we get rid of our fast SAN, storage area network storage, for our databases and just put that on Hadoop? Because I heard it was real cheap. And the storage we use right now for our databases is really expensive. And if you know anything about what I've just talked about, that is just completely silly on its face. But what happened was this person read an article from CIO Australia magazine, and he thought that, oh my God, we're missing out. We don't do this. Why? We should certainly apply it. So the whole point of bringing that up is that people need to take a step back from the hype and really evaluate what's going on. You don't really hear people talk about big data anymore. You're not going to hear people talking about machine learning and AI 10 years from now like they are today. So step back from that and say, look, machine learning is a thing. It's a tool in my tool belt for sure, but it is not required for me to become a data-driven organization. Don't try to replace your database storage with Hadoop, okay? Just don't do it.
Dave, important question. It just seems like a topic came up and we have to address it here. This show has a very specific stance on AI. Where do you land in terms of Skynet, for or against?
Well, Nick, I have a saying that I've used for a long time in my career. I've never met a computer I didn't like, but I've met tons of people I can't stand. So I'm pro Skynet.
Yeah, that's very much in alignment with where we are in the show. Anything we can do to promote and accelerate T1000, I think everyone can get behind.
Yeah. And I think that, Nick and I are already working on T2000. So we're right around the corner from there. And also just bringing it back to the show real quickly, Dave, you say that in 10 to 15 years, we'll no longer be talking about machine learning and AI. Our this episode and Between Two Consultants in general so cutting edge that we're already not speaking about machine learning and AI. Right, Nick?
Yep, don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you guys are so far ahead of the curve, right?
That's absolutely right.
You got the T2000 prototype. It's in Skunkworks right now, so you don't want to talk about it.
That's right. That's exactly right. So far what we have, number 5 for top mistakes, training is one and done. Wrong. Have to have a center of Ethan. Number 4, mistake, synergies, training to select roles. Number 3, overly fascinated with machine learning and AI. Nick, do you want to do any more deep dives into number 3, fascination with machine learning and AI?
I think we get it as well, Dave. If we look at, like dashboards, and obviously that's kind of my realm, and wanting to do really fancy reporting and using the latest tool on the block to do it, but still just lacking that the basic reporting of what's going on. Wanting to move into dashboarding and do like forecasts and, like you said, some of the more sophisticated predictive analytics. We're just leaving some of the basic. Hey, what's your revenue? Can you tell what your revenue is? And can you tell it monthly? And it's not exciting. It's not fun, but it's a great place to start before jumping into all the excitement of the more exciting, sophisticated things.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with that, and I would go even one step further. And I will use a specific example. So if you have a YouTube channel, if you're a creator on YouTube, and you go to analytics for your YouTube channel, the overwhelming default visualization on the analytics dashboard is a black and white line chart. Maybe a black and white bar chart. You might also see that as well. That's basically it. That's the overwhelming data visualizations on their analytics. Whether you're PewDiePie and you've got millions upon millions of subscribers, or if you're Dave Langer and you only got 45,000 subscribers, doesn't matter. It's a black and white line chart. People get really sad when I tell them that, like, your chart's like way too busy, dude. What are you doing? You don't step away from the donut chart. You don't need it. Line chart. Why? Because the best way to understand what's going on in the business is to look at it over time. Are you up? Are you down? Well, you need historical context to do that, and a line chart is the single best way to do that because it taps into the visual processing areas of the brain for pattern recognition. Nothing works better than a line chart. So I'm 100% with you, and I would go even more Spartan probably than that and say, look, get rid of pie charts, donut charts, multicolored bar charts. First and foremost, you know what? If you're going to create an executive dashboard, have 3 to 5 KPIs, 3 to 5 line charts, 1 for each KPI. Done.
This is a provocative statement, and Nick, you're so heavy into visual analytics. Like, are you on board with that, or do you have any?
It's like Dave is crazy.
I'm just generally not into data. I find it's one of those things. It's like CDs or, the VCR, like sounded super awesome at the time, and just really didn't catch on. Yeah. Kind of feel like that.
Yeah.
But also, I'd have to agree with Dave on the line chart, the YouTube line chart, where it's got the 2 lines just showing how your performance is and then comparing it to Between Two Consultants, which is obviously the gold standard for where people want to be. So simpler the better.
Yeah, it's like it's amazing. It's almost more like this.
To the moon.
Yeah, it's remarkable, Dave.
Yeah. Well, so I'll go one step further and advocate that not only can you use line charts as I just described, but with some relatively minor modifications, you can turn the line chart into a statistical analysis tool that anybody can actually use, including, for example, a lead in a customer call service center, and where they can say, hey, are our calls actually trending up in a statistically significant way? And they don't have to learn anything about the normal distribution or anything like that. So when you augment the line chart with these kinds of things I'm talking about, it becomes a very, very powerful tool for enabling data-driven decision-making across an organization. And they are easy to put on a dashboard. Simple, simple, simple.
Love it. So obscuring the complexity that's going on behind it with something that's visually easy to grasp by folks maybe who are not traditionally served by analytics. Awesome.
Okay. What number are we up to now?
7.
I've tuned out the last 7 minutes. So
Yeah, yeah.
As soon as I started dissing donut charts, Ethan's like, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. I'm not having it.
like, Nick, I don't know how we're vetting our guests, but there's been a major error.
No, I
Hey.
like the pro Skynet stance. So I think that kind of forgives everything. Yeah.
All right, Dave, we're to number 2.
We're number 2. That your data-driven strategy, the execution of the transformation of your organization is being driven by your IT organization. And speaking as a former IT person myself, I've worked many, many years in my career as an IT professional. I was an enterprise architect for a number of years, and I'm still saying this. You do not want your IT organization driving this for you. So this is not about some sort of big IT initiative. This is not about enterprise data management. This is not about self-service BI. This is not about an IT tooling solution or, quite frankly, a bunch of DAMA-style processes that you need to put in place. It's not about that at all. Those can certainly be helpful, don't get me wrong, but they are not a prerequisite for becoming a data-driven organization. So if this is being led by your IT organization, bad idea, because it's not going to work. And reason number 1, we'll make that abundantly clear. Now, this is going to also be quite heretical, I know. That's kind of like my stock in trade. As a recovering enterprise architect, I feel like I can say this with a certain amount of credibility. Enterprise data quality, some sort of enterprise data quality initiative, program, project, is not a requirement to get started on becoming a truly data-driven organization. It helps, like I said, it'll help, obviously, but you don't have to have data stewards in place. You don't have to have all of the things that go along with those types of programs in place to get started. And in fact, in my experience, they're detrimental because folks that work in the business typically don't understand the benefits up front. They tend to understand the benefits after the fact, years later, once a robust system is put in place, a robust program is put in place, but they don't understand it up front. And that's often the problem.
You sort of threw in like an Easter egg there, right? Like it's almost like that was a 2, like number 2 was data-driven strategy driven by IT org, and then you gave us you don't need like the most advanced data to get started, because I don't think that was number 1, was it?
We haven't got to number 1 yet.
Oh man, I'm excited. Nick, are you excited?
Yeah, this is like, I kind of thought that would be your number 1. So I'm really interested to hear what the number 1 is.
Yeah, but let's do the. Should we do the countdown first, and
Yeah.
I'll repeat all 4. Or Nick, did you want to do go into the why it's a mistake to have it driven by an IT org?
Do I want to? I can give a new top 5. I can give a different one.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm curious. Well, why don't we hold off on your top 5? So number 5, training as a one and done. Big mistake. Number 4, only training to very few select roles. Let me get my hand in the screen there. Okay. Usually it's Nick who's doing the hand modeling, so this is new. Number 3, don't become fascinated by machine learning and AI. Big mistake to do that. Number 2, data-driven strategy driven by your IT organization. Don't do that. Number 1, I'm on the edge of.
Number 1 is put Skynet in charge. Oh wait, no, that's
Awkward.
Forget I said that. You can just cut that out. All right, number 1. The actual number 1 is avoiding cultural change. So there is a quote that I love that's attributed to a former CEO of Ford that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So if your IT organization is leading something, I've been in the tech biz for, almost like 25 years now. I have never seen IT lead a organizational culture change, ever. Is it possible? Certainly is. I wouldn't bet on it personally. Ergo, you need to make sure that you don't avoid the cultural impact of becoming data driven. And it has to start outside of the IT organization. And to Nick's earlier question, it's got to start as high up the ladder of management as you can possibly get, ideally with the CEO. But maybe an organization decides to roll this out in an incremental approach, and maybe they start with a vice president and they say, hey, go off, your organization is going to become totally data driven. We're going to do this as a business experiment, but it still starts at the top with the VP.
Love it.
So, and it starts with management. To become a data driven organization, to be truly a data driven organization, it has to start with management in all aspects. And I mean, not only like training management, I mean changing the compensation models for managers to reward experimentation and truly data-driven decisions. And if at all possible, maybe not necessarily from an HR perspective, but maybe culturally, starting to punish executives and managers that try to make decisions from their gut or based on their feelings or based on their experience. Really incentivize managers to be like, look, there's no downside now for you to experiment, conduct data-driven business experiments. As long as you report back the findings, you're not going to get penalized for it. In fact, you're going to get rewarded for it. Those are the sorts of cultural changes that need to happen. And then, of course, you do need to train all the managers, right? If you're going to say you need to be data-driven, you're going to be rewarded for it. You got to give them the tools to allow them to be successful. Otherwise, you're going to get cultural resistance from it. So you need to train all the managers on the things that I was describing earlier as well, including coaching. And in fact, you might even start there before you go to, lower in the organization structure, right? Leads and that sort of thing. You might start with directors and VPs and that sort of thing.
And what sort of coaching would you? And this is a question, of course, I know the answer to it, but it's to help Nick. What sort of coaching would you be looking at?
So let me give you a prime example, right? Coaching. Here's a great example, and I'm basing this on my own personal experience, and I'm hoping it'll resonate not only with you two gentlemen, but also with your audience as well. So imagine a VP that gets a coach to help them become data-driven. And through the coaching, the cultural change in the VP manifests like this. The VP's in a quarterly business review meeting, and they are shown data that irrefutably demonstrates that their particular pet project, their latest initiative, is failing. It's like not doing well at all. So first and foremost, the VP doesn't kill the messenger. They thank the messenger. Maybe it's like a director that brings that information to the quarterly business review. And then the VP happily kills the project and says, well, we tried it and it didn't work. So the level of coaching that you need, especially at the executive level, might be a bit more extensive than maybe for a lead in the customer service department. But notice how powerful it is. If any of you gentlemen have ever sat in a quarterly business review with an executive, that's never happened in my entire career, not once. In fact, you don't say anything bad about the executive's pet project or latest initiative, even if the data shows that this is a total disaster, because you don't want to get killed. That level of coaching might be a little bit intense. You might need essentially a consultant to be paired up with your executives, but that's what's necessary, because what happens is the VP's directs see that and they get the message loud and clear. And then that kind of cascades down the organization.
I'd love, Nick, I don't want to interrupt, so go ahead. I have a comment, but go ahead.
Yeah, Dave, I love the diving deep into the cultural shift by adjusting compensation. And it's like, well, are you serious about it or are you not? Like, are you really willing to shift the culture, or just keep, kind of like tipping the hat towards this data thing, and kind of go through the motions of becoming data driven, but not actually truly shifting the culture? Like, are your people waking up Monday morning thinking, hey, if I share out this dashboard, this report, to the whole marketing org, it's going to give them this added value, this added insight into our customer, or whatever the story might be, versus just getting up and doing their run-of-the-mill job, and maybe there is great reporting and insight there, but they don't care. They're not incentivized by it. They're not motivated by it. I love that, just that idea of how willing and how seriously are you going to take shifting the culture, because that's what it's going to take. I love that. Ethan, sorry, I know you had another
Yeah.
question there.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be critical. So I'd like to just do a very quick role play, Dave, if you don't mind. And by role play, I'm not talking about the LARPing that I do on the weekend. Um, very, very, very Star Wars heavy, by the way.
Okay.
I'm Chewbacca. In terms of this role play, let's say that like you were giving this message to Nick and I, and the message was our laser-like focus on MySpace. How might you deliver that message to me, the VP, and Nicholas, the assistant to the VP?
Right. And I'm going to make an assumption that you guys have been trained, right?
Yeah.
This culture shift, you've been trained, you've been coached.
Yeah. All right.
And what I would do is I would put up one of these line charts that I was telling you about earlier that has the statistical analysis capability and say, as you can clearly see based on the chart and the historical data, we have seen not only no improvement in the traffic, in the generation of revenue, eyeballs, whatever it is we're caring about from our MySpace initiatives. In fact, it is down in a statistically significant way. And given the historical trends, we have no reasonable expectation that this is going to change anytime soon.
Nick, I'm very angry at the moment. How are you feeling?
I'm not feeling great, and I think Dave's missing the research and effort we put into Skynet, and how that's going to affect the forecast. So, look, great idea, Dave. But probably in practice, not very.
Really missed the mark.
Executed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy we did that role play. I think it really brought it all together.
Yeah.
Well, there's another aspect to this too, right? So we've talked about like business experimentation and the idea of like calling the VP's baby ugly in terms of their pet project. But where this really has a lot of power in my experience for an organization is realistic goal setting. Because, and I'll give you an example, a real world example from my own career. I had an executive say, Dave, I want you to formulate 3 to 5 KPIs that we're going to use at the business level, for the company level, to manage our progress. And I want you to set goals for each one of those KPIs that we can then filter down through the organization, maybe using some sort of balanced scorecard type methodology, something like that. And I said, okay, cool. So I went and I looked at the historical data. I used these charts that I mentioned, which produce ranges that you could say, look, unless there's a substantive radical shift in the business, these are reasonable statistical estimates of the range of values that you're going to see on the KPI. Think of sales, for example, right? 80% of the time, unless we do something radically different, or the economic landscape changes, or we introduce MySpace.com, we're not going to see radical changes in our sales revenue numbers. And I created a series of goals based on the historical data that were reasonable. And the executive didn't like them. He thought they were too low. He decided that he wanted stretch goals. And here's the thing, not one of those KPIs ever made it nowhere close to the goals that they set. And here's the thing, people find that demoralizing. Right? So let's say you've got a sales bogey coming down from the CEO and you're the VP of sales and there's no way you're going to be able to hit it. Right? You might put on a brave face and go talk to your folks, but that the account reps are going to be like, oh, I'm not even going to bother trying, right? I'm not going to make bonus this quarter. No way. It's not going to happen. So that's where being a data-driven organization probably has the most impact, is especially in mature organizations, is setting reasonable, actionable goals that are data-driven and are achievable.
Mm-hmm. And Nick has given me numerous unachievable goals on Between Two Consultants, including he's told me a number of times, goal number 1, don't insult the guests, which is just, it's impossible.
Try to be insightful,
Try to be, it's demoralizing, these ridiculous goals.
Right.
Can't be
it's especially when he books guests like me. I mean, I might as well just have a bullseye painted on my forehead for you.
That's right. Hey, Dave, when I do my LARPing on the weekend, what is the action role that Nick Kelly, do you think he takes?
He's either Vader or Palpatine, I would think.
Nice. I was gonna go with Princess Leia.
Hey, wait a second. I thought you only insulted the guest, not the co-host.
That's actually a compliment coming from him, Dave.
Oh, okay. Well, there you
It's
go.
a very low bar.
All right, so what should we count it down? Top 5 mistakes, or 5 mistakes you must avoid in becoming a data-driven organization. Number 5, training is one and done. Number 4, training only very select roles. Number 3, a fascination with machine learning and AI. Number 2, data-driven strategy driven by the IT organization. And number 1, Nick, do you remember number 1?
Nope.
Avoiding cultural change.
Yes. Gold.
That's it.
Absolute gold.
Those are awesome top 5s. Nick, where should we take it from here?
Well, Dave, I'd like to thank you for spending the time with us. It's been really interesting. I hope the folks listening are going to try and practice some of this if they're really serious about change. And there's 2 things I'd ask you here. Firstly, where do you recommend people start? So like, maybe imagine they're in the IT organization. So, let's say they're there and they've been given a mandate or some sort of budget initiative to progress the organization along a little bit, and they can't get that buy-in from, let's say, the C-suite. Is there somewhere you'd recommend they'd start on the journey?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would start with the business of IT. But that's going to be culturally kind of driven, right? If the CIO has a seat at the table, right, they're at the same level with everyone else. They're not like 3 levels below the CFO or something like that. That might not necessarily be a good strategy. But if the CIO has a seat at the table with the other C-level executives, then they can start with the business of IT, because it becomes a lot easier when you say, look, the CIO wants to be data driven, because then you've got the top of the IT pyramid initiating the cultural change. However, some organizations that won't necessarily play very well, because maybe marketing might be like, well, the IT guys think they're awesome, but I don't care. Okay, so next up, what you'd want to do is find a organization that has a propensity to be data savvy already. That's been my expertise. So finance is usually a great place to start. Finance people, they know data, they love data, and they deal with the money. So that's a great place to start. Finance is a great place to start. Manufacturing, if you have a manufacturing division in your organization, is also a good place to start. There's also a culture of data there. For example, in the quality control space, in Six Sigma, there's a lot of data savviness already in a lot of manufacturing organizations. Barring those 3, starting with the business of IT, going to finance, or going to manufacturing, the next place I would go is marketing, for 2 reasons. One, most marketing these days has a very strong data component, especially with the rise of the digital aspect of marketing. I think last time digital marketing now has surpassed on average all other forms of marketing in terms of aggregate spend in large companies. I think it's more than 50% goes to digital type marketing efforts, whether that's blogs, digital ads, Instagram posts, whatever it might be. So that's another great place to start, because you have data to work with. And if you can use your analytics and you can use the data well, there is a direct relationship to the top line. So marketing is also a really good place to go. I would avoid sales, and quite frankly, to start with, because my experience has been personally is that's pretty difficult. HR is a good place as well. Unfortunately, HR typically doesn't have as much sway or influence in an organization, in my experience, as maybe you would like. So start with IT, not there, finance, marketing, manufacturing, and then marketing.
I love it, Dave. I also like that you put HR towards the end, because with the advent of Skynet, there's not going to be a lot of human resources needed anyway. So really on point. And Dave, I know you've got tons of content out there, all sorts of interesting videos, trainings. Where can people find that and learn a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so I have a website, but that's usually not the best place to go. So the two primary places to follow me for content in this space, as well as to get tutorials on how to build your own data analysis skills. You can follow me on LinkedIn. That's a prime place to go. Or you can just go to YouTube, and in the YouTube search bar, just type my name, Dave Langer, and I will come back as the first search result. And I have many, many free tutorials on using data analysis with Excel, ranging from simple to relatively advanced, and all done in Excel.
Awesome. Also, obviously, you'll have the MySpace address coming pretty soon. Once you,
Of course.
We'll set that up for you.
Yeah, and I'll get a GeoCities account too. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, and if you need any directions, like if you need me to help you hands-on, you can use MapQuest to get over to my place.
Whoa, MapQuest, wow. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's MapQuest and Zip2. Those are my two favorites currently.
Awesome. Dave, thanks so much for being on the show. It's really been a pleasure. Hope you come back on, and if people do want to check out more of your content, check out Dave on Data, check out YouTube channel, and as well as LinkedIn. This has been another episode of Between Two Consultants. I'm Nicholas Kelly.
And I'm Ethan Silvers.
And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much.